For attending this evening for another Warren Smith technique talk. This is another one in the series. I think it's the third or fourth that we've had this year. Last time was about off-piste. This time it is about biomechanics and wellness. Um, the next talk is on the 23rd of September, so check out the website, get registered if you haven't already. But with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Rob and Warren to talk about biomechanics and what that actually means towards skiing.
Yeah, hi everybody out there. And Obviously Rob's with us as well. As you may know or may not, me and Rob quite often going to be the same in October. We're on tour presenting a lot of these lectures and talks at different ski shops and things like that. And for us, the reason that these talks came about, the Ski Technique Lab was developed, and a lot of the sort of ethos of how we coach is based upon is that we need functional movement patterns in the body to match what skiing kind of requires of us. And then in the same conversation as that, you bring up matters of the equipment, the fit, and the ski length, and how you steer left and how you steer right, or how you flex left and right, and everything else. It's always been apparent to us that when we really look at things closer and then scratch back the surface a little bit, people are usually different between left and right, and it usually does always add up to their turn direction. So what me and Rob do, which Rob is definitely going to be showing you much more hands-on imagery on this talk, is we try and get to the bottom of it by testing um, movement patterns. And then by testing it, you usually come up with an idea that they're not the same between the left and right side of the body, and there's actually quite easy solutions for it. And that's a really important thing for us. Rob, what's your take on it? Obviously we all explain things differently, but what's your take on the biomechanics of it, how we do it?
Come on, unmute. There we go. So yeah, no, very much so in total agreement. And I know we've kind of loosely covered some of the topics already as we've gone through the previous three talks with you guys. We've touched on some of these subjects a little bit, but I think ultimately what it boils down to is this awareness from a coaching and a learning point of view that unless the body is in a state where it can make specific movements, if you're being asked to make a technical output, you can't do it if the movement doesn't work. So it's kind of addressing those raw points in more of a controlled environment, almost off the snow, and educating ourselves and testing ourselves and creating an awareness as to where you're at before you can then start to reapply it into the actual sport of skiing.
Yeah, that's a really good summary, Rob. And I think from our point of view, we we always put this question to people, like, um, if you had the best instructor in the world, you'd still be blocked by biomechanics. So let's say your instructor was $1,000 a day, but you were repeatedly being asked to finish off your turn to the left, and the instructor wasn't having much success because of your physiological state. I know Rob's going to be showing you that. I think it's point number 3 on tonight's talk. But the reality of it is, it does show itself, and this is why when you listen to the talk and you get a bit of the education, or you get a bit of an understanding of it, it's actually really beneficial. It is, for those that take ski lessons, it's very beneficial. Obviously, you get more value for money out of a ski lesson when you've unlocked yourself physically. But what we want to try and reach out to is it's for the 95% of skiers that don't take ski lessons. Either don't have the budget for a lesson, don't have the time for a lesson, just don't have the mental sort of want to have a ski lesson, but still want to get better and ski safer and ski more dynamically. This is where it becomes really interesting, where someone can change their own ski way just by unlocking some really simple physiological movements.
Yeah, you'll just see as we're talking now, just summarizing it, you can actually see I'm flashing through the pages of our manual that basically goes alongside these talks. So this is the actual sort of the raw text, if you like, and the raw information that we're kind of going to spill off in lots of different directions. Obviously, as we talk tonight, and we'll do it in a little bit more of a natural way. But this is the more sort of official stuff. So if you've got the ability to be able to kind of like listen and read at the same time, everything that you can kind of see on the pages here is what we're basically discussing. So this is the introduction page that you can just see here. But as we chat through, I'll just keep sort of scrolling through, so you can see there's an overview of biomechanics and what that basically means. Obviously, you don't have to read every single last little bit of it, but but yeah, it's just how we kind of.
Does anyone have any questions coming off the back of that sort of explanation from our point of view? Because I think, mechanics, obviously, we need the body to mechanically function, and it does have that great relationship with equipment. The whole thing pulls together because we're a sport where the body's got to function with a ski boot and skis. It becomes really interesting when we see functional movement make great effects on ski boot and skis, or sometimes not so, and that's an interesting one.
Yeah, Warren, I've got a question. So where do we, I mean, you said it's available, but where exactly do we access this information that Rob's just running through the slides of?
So the information that Rob's showing you through, you can go onto the Academy website and you can have a look at it. I think it's also on the ski show web, or the London Snow Show website. It's on there as well, because obviously it's one of the products we're going to be delivering at the show. But basically, if you go onto the Academy website, look at Technique Lab, and under the Technique Lab tab, all 6 of the testing points are on there. And it's really useful because it covers an explanation of it, talking about stability, mobility, movement patterns, strength. But it gives you the tests, and then it shows you 2 or 3 things that will improve your scores on those tests. So that's the important part, is like when you go through this, when ideally you go through it with a coach that has a knowledge of it, but also we believe people can do it themselves to a certain degree and still get it quite close to being correct. And under that basis, that's why the website is quite useful, because the videos and the content that Rob's got there and is showing you, a lot of the videos you can see on the website, and it will really explain itself going through that.
Great, thanks.
Do you want to go into the first test, Warren, and then we can sort of go through from there? We're sort of ready to go onto that slide.
Absolutely. I'll let Rob slowly sort of take over how this sort of flows. But in terms of like the 1 to 6 tests, test number 1 is talking about the range of your ankle flex. Test number 2 talks about your stability, your lateral stability of your legs. And that's controlling that angle laterally that usually, if it's not controlled, leaves people in A-frames. We call that one the 10-second test. Test number 3 is the inner rotation of your outside or downhill leg. And that's when the hips are facing straight ahead or down the hill, and your ability to inwardly rotate your outside or downhill leg. So let's say, for example, you're turning left, it would be your right leg's steering range inwardly. We test that left and right, and that's a really major part of what we're doing. The 4th one is the leg flexion and extension test. And there's usually a difference in strength between left and right, and stability. The 5th one is angulation and leg lead. On that, nearly everyone shows form that doesn't really match what we need to be doing on the slope, but it also shows and feels a difference between your left side angulation and your right side angulation. And then the 6th point is core endurance, core stability, but stability that can endure leg movements, can endure arm movements, can endure being moved around by what the snow throws at you. So we like to think of that as like core endurance. I think we've all got core strength to a certain degree. But going to point number 1, which Rob's going to elaborate on, ever since we've, as coaches, been running these courses that we do, we get quite a few numbers of people on each of the courses, and for that reason, we found that we consistently see differences in people's movement range and stability of the ankle flex, joint. That joint and that ability for the ankle to move will quite often show a difference between left and right. And what me and Rob do, we test people. We get people to stand against or in front of a wall, and then we try to get people to step back. And let's just say, for example, they step 10 centimeters away from the wall. We usually get them to flex forward. And in that forward flex in action, it's really important that we cover a few base points. We want to make sure that people don't rotate. We want to make sure that people don't force it. We try to make sure people don't lift their heel. And we try to get people to stop before they get to a point of their limit. And the limit usually is when their heel lifts. Rob, do you want to elaborate on that slightly?
Yeah, just I mean, if you can see the screen there, guys. Obviously, I've got the cursor just kind of over the pictures there. Can everybody see that? If you're mic'd up, just give us a yes, and then hopefully you should be able to sort of see the cursor just kind of over the pictures on the screen there. But yeah, basically what Warren was saying there, very, very simple test, and these are like real simple screening tests that you'd use. I mean, you might have used them with a physio before, you might have used them sort of in any kind of like sports science sort of environment if you've been through it before. But it's the simplicity of it that's the key thing. So you can kind of see here where the foot is on the floor here, the toe is nice and flush against the wall. And then the neutral position would be allowing our knee just to track over our big toe and our second toe until the knee touches the wall. Now that currently, all right, would be a score of 0. Now you can see just underneath the foot there is a ruler. Okay, so from there, because the toe is against the wall, that is now level with 0 on the ruler. Okay, what we then start to progressively do is we start to take the foot further and further back away from the wall, almost like 5 centimeters at a time or 3 or 4 centimeters at a time. Okay. And we keep flexing forwards with the knee, trying to get the knee against the wall without, as you can see circled there, the heel coming off the ground. As soon as you start to feel the heel coming off the ground, that is where you mark your score off against the ruler. So, for example, there, let's say that was 15 centimeters. On the left ankle, as you can see there, would make a score of 15 centimeters. Would then just repeat that on the other foot using the same process. I can just admit someone there. There we go. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. So what you'll tend to find is, as Warren's already sort of alluded to there, it's very, 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 very rare that you'll score the same on both ankles. Okay, you're likely to see one score slightly less than the other. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that ends up being your weaker turning direction, but it's certainly something that gives not just you as a learner, but also your coach information and data to be able to sort of analyze your skiing with a little bit more accuracy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really key point, Rob. For us as coaches, we've had scores, and let's look forward. Let's look ahead 3 weeks. 3 weeks time, me and Rob will be kicking off in Inverness, working our way down the country. Edinburgh, Manchester, going to different venues. And on our venues, we're going to see scores. This sounds crazy, but someone in the room will score something like 4 centimeters and show a really low range of flex. They're usually our worst scoring scenarios. And then me and Rob on an evening will be like, wow, if that person hasn't actually got the flex range to ski technically correct, but also more importantly, if something happens suddenly, like you hit a boulder or you went over a compression or whatever you do in skiing, because we say often it's a sport of action, but 50% of that, is sport of action. The other 50% is reaction. You got to be prepared, in your ski boots. You better take a shock or two or whatever you're going through. But we've seen really, really low scores. We've also seen really high scores. The key for what Rob just said there, the difference between left and right is important to balance out. Usually once you're made aware of this test, you can change it very easily. From a range point of view, just simple things, like calf stretching or whatever it might be. Other things you can look at, and this is really interesting, and I'm sure Rob will elaborate on this. At the ski show, I love doing it at the Northern and the London ski shows, because when you do the stability test, which is the other thing, sometimes someone can score very high on the flexing test, which is great. So they've got a really lovely range of movement to dominate a ski boot. But we also see people from a stability point of view that have good range of movement, not necessarily scoring well in the stability stage. So one leg can really wobble when it goes through this flex, if you're standing on a block or even on the ground. And the other leg could be quite stable, again, showing left and right side imbalances. But Rob, I mean, that crosses over, which we won't go into tonight because it'll take too long. But point number 4 can almost be covered in point number 1 as well, can't it? Just to explain to people about that.
Absolutely, yeah. No, definitely. As we start to sort of go into the, and I've just paused the screen, haven't I? Is that you? Is that you back on there? Yes, it is. Yeah, good. No, absolutely. No, it does cross. They all, in a weird way, if you kind of like look at these like little circular icons that we have for each test, ideally you want to look at those circles as all sort of intermingling into each other. You know, they all have relationships with each other movement. You know, it's not like in skiing is just a very sort of like one-dimensional sport. You know, it's about combining and linking different movement patterns for whatever output that you're looking for. So obviously if you were carving, for example, there'd be an awful lot of lateral movement that's involved in there, but that doesn't mean to say that there's not a lot of leg flexion and extension. There's a lot, you know. There's obviously a little bit less in the way of rotation in there, but then if you were skiing moguls, there's not that much leaning going in there, but there's a lot of leg flexion and extension and an awful lot of rotation. So yeah, there's different levels and different amounts of each movement for whatever you're actually trying to do at that particular point, sort of on the mountain.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's got any questions about that or know any friends that they ski with where they can sort of like almost see that their friend is struggling to flex the ski boot. You know, I mean, I know we see it on courses where people come along. Some people are naturally flexing and dominating their ski boot. Very important. And obviously to stress this, if you're not dominating your ski boot flex, there is no doubt about it that you're going to be putting a lot of torque through your knee joint. And if that knee joint's getting torque, unpredictable things can happen. You know, if you're in the back seat because you're not dominating your ankle flex, your knee's going to get it. And we never want that in skiing. So if anyone's got any questions about that, it'd be really good to go over it with anybody.
I'm just going to try and share this screen now, guys. This is actually like a full video. It's all what I'll do is I'll post the links to these videos. They're all on our YouTube channel. This is all sort of free content that you guys can have a look at. But this is like a more visual sort of representation of basically everything that we've just been talking about there. So again, you can see just getting the toe up against the wall. There's your zero score there as the knee goes against the wall, and then just bit by bit start to move the foot back and still just trying to track over the big toe and the second toe, just until the point that you start to feel a little bit of tension. Now, I'll just pause it there, actually. So the tension might start to appear in different places here. So, for example, from a muscular point of view, if you think about your calf muscle, all right, obviously you've got your gastrocnemius, which is your top bit here, and then your soleus down here that comes out the top of your Achilles tendon. If you're tight in these areas, obviously that's going to limit how you can articulate and move forwards from that joint there, okay? But it doesn't always have to be a muscular thing. Sometimes you can actually feel the tension in the joint. So, for example, just to make it a little bit more personal, I know when I do this on my weaker side, which is my right ankle, through injury, in my ankle joint, I know that the actual movement is restricted here. It's not in the muscle at all. I'm actually quite flexible from a calf stretching point of view. But I actually feel just in my talus joint there, just on the sort of bridge of my ankle, that's where I actually feel the sort of lock or the stop of where I can't go any further, basically. So it can kind of affect you in two ways. The good thing about the muscular side of things, that can be worked on. So any kind of flexibility training or just stretching, anything that you can kind of do from like a mobility point of view, you can increase that score. So let's say you score a 10 centimeters, okay, you could increase that to 12, 13, 14 through, you know, a little bit of time and a little bit of effort. I'll keep it playing through so you can see it.
I think that's a really interesting thing what Rob's just said. One of the things we often do at the ski show, you know, but when we start our tour on the 1st of October up in Inverness, by the time that the London show takes place, those people that did the first event up in Craigden in Inverness, they would have made considerable changes in a 3-week window. And that's why what it could be quite interesting from tonight, if people's going away, looking at the website, trying the tests out on themselves, actually making some notes and records of it that we can then try and help people with. You know, we're really happy to give feedback on that as well. What do you reckon, Rob? Is it something you think we can record and then add to as people work through?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's good. It's all good for us. Anything like that, any kind of like measurements you can do, and just general sort of signs of progression are really, really useful for us. You know, particularly if, let's say, you know, I mean, obviously it's one thing going to ski with sort of myself or Warren, you know, because we know that we've sort of met you on these talks. But if you were going to go and ski with any ski instructor, for you to then go to them with information on these scores, or even further than that, when we start to get into like the equipment side of things, for you to go to a boot fitter, you know, when you're buying a new pair of boots, to say, look, like I've got these physiological issues, okay, there's the information. Then they can, like, you know, helps select the right boot for you. You know, it's all good information that kind of, it ties it all together. It ties the sort of the learner and the skier to the shop, and then to the technique, you know, and those kind of things all start to get, you know, bridged together a little bit better.
Well, I think what Rob said there is really important. You know, we've chatted to loads of Ski Club of Great Britain reps, which is such a big backbone of, you know, what goes on in the Alps, and a lot of the reps themselves are starting to develop quite a good knowledge of this system, and in a way, you know, can offer quite a strong position. You know, partly sort of like what a ski instructor would offer, partly what an equipment expert would offer, and there's a lot of people now, as Ski Club of Great Britain reps that have that knowledge. So, you know, that's something we're going to be talking about around the same time as the London show, the snow show, linked in with Listex as well. So you should sort of watch this space. But yeah, as far as I know from people I've spoke to, that knowledge base is also with some of the, you know, the Ski Club of Great Britain reps.
There's actually a message in the chat as well about Tim's done the assessment himself just now, I think.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. So I just brought that up. I just saw that pop up then. I did some set after a dislocated ankle fracture. Been checking whilst watching. Still limited on the side of the fracture. Working at it constantly does help. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tim. Like, it's. I think the thing is with that is it's like I think whenever you're coming back from any kind of injury, and this doesn't always have to relate to injury, this, but particularly when you're coming back from any kind of injury, I think sometimes you think physio is like just like a magic word. Oh, you go to physio and then you get better. Like the thing that we sort of disassociate ourselves sometimes from is like the actual hard work that goes into that. You know, it's not necessarily always a pleasant kind of feeling. You know, I think if a physio is doing a good job, like, it's going to hurt. Like, you're going to go through some kind of like long, relatively kind of hard process to get the gains that you're looking for. It's not just like a magic pill that you can just swallow and all of a sudden you've got all your mobility back, you know. So yeah, no, it's really important to kind of understand that this does come with time and it does come with effort. Okay. Oh God, my phone's going mental. Sorry, I need to turn that to silent.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, the more of you that can bring in those tests and scores with us, that would be brilliant. Rob's going to lead you on to the point number 2 now, and use some of these screen shots and images to try and show you. Like for us, point number 2, lateral control, one of the most interesting things that you can see, because you can actually really change someone's technique when you switch on certain muscle groups to do with lateral stability. You know, obviously you protect the knee joint, but from a technique point of view as well, you know, you really get your skis matching so much better, turning left, turning right, crossing your hips over your feet. When that line between the ball and socket joint, knee and ankle is much closer to being aligned and stabilized, the results are better. But yeah, Rob, what do you say on that from people you ski with?
Yeah, no, just sort of following that on, guys. Like, you know, so for example, we'll always kind of, you know, show like all the kind of like glory images of this. So you got Victor from our team just here, you know, like cranking his hips right over inside the turn. But if you look at the angles of the skis here, they're very symmetrical, you know, which means that when we actually sort of take it back to the sort of bare movements, which is point 2, which is here. If you look at this picture just here on the left hand side, what we're talking about is about being symmetrical in our legs. So it's almost like if you got your X-ray glasses on and you were looking at the skeleton in this picture here, you'd see the femurs going into the hip socket here, okay, and then again on this side to here, and then you should be able to track that down to your feet. Now, obviously, you're in a constantly changing environment when you're on the mountain. So not only have you got changeable snow to contend with, you've got changeable gradients to contend with, you've got changeable conditions, changeable visibility. There's so much that can actually affect the consistency of us being able to maintain this position with our legs. But the point is what we need to be able to do is create an awareness of this position as like our reference point. That's what we want to be able to recover back to should things go wrong. But to be able to do that, we've got to be able to create a very good relationship between our skeleton and our muscles. So it's all very well just saying, right, we'll put that. We need to know how to do that, when to do that, why to do that. Okay, and that's what all this information here does, kind of explore a little bit. But the way that you feel this is by doing this test. Okay, so what I'll do is just give us 2 seconds. I'll bring the YouTube channel up again and bring this into play. So this is again, this is the video of the same exercise that you just saw in the manual just there. Oh, hang on, let me just turn the volume down. We don't need Warren's voice anymore, do we? Let's just play that through. So you can see just by pressing a little bit of weight through the chair, that makes our feet a little bit lighter. All we're trying to do, all right, is pull our feet together and slide them apart as slowly as we can. By doing that, what we're actually doing is we're activating our muscles on our adductors and our abductors that kind of sit on the inside and our outside of our groin and the outside of our hips just here, okay? What we're not trying to do here is pull our feet together. You see it a little bit better front on. What we're not trying to do is pull the knees together here, okay? It's really important that we're super accurate with the movement here and make sure that it's actually coming from the base. Remember, we're attached to our skis and our skis are attached to the snow, okay? Sorry, that's my village church bells right outside my window. I would normally mute myself here, but I'll just play this through, guys, and then you can kind of have a watch of that. The core stability test. Let me send it back again. Play it through again. So you can see super slowly there, pulling the feet close together. And then once we reach hip width apart there, then pull them apart. Sorry about the bells. Once again, pulling them together. Really slowly. The key thing is the speed. Like anybody could do this fast. You could just like really easily lighten your feet and pull your feet together really, really quickly. This is about doing it as slowly as you possibly can. So the 10 seconds is almost like a minimum, really, what we're looking for here.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say,
anyone got any questions on this at all?
Well, I was going to say, Rob, if you can, is my audio still working, or is it back on?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So from a point of view, from like how we would coach, you know, this is one of those areas where we've definitely seen quite big changes in someone skiing from work that they've done off of the snow. So in terms of the test that Rob's showing you, even during a ski week, like being out in the Alps as part of a 5-day course or whatever it might be, we've seen quite massive changes in someone where we haven't touched them, you know, with their skiing like exercises or things like that. They've just come back out after going back to their chalet, going back to their apartment, got the friction correct on the floor. You could be using a towel, couple of pieces of paper. You know, we use sliders like off Amazon or whatever, like gym sliders. And they've actually made a really significant visual change in their skiing technique with regards to skiing symmetrically, or as it might be commercially known, like the A-frame, overnight, you know, and that's why this one's quite significant. It is one of those tests that you watch, you know, when you come on the stand, or if you're looking at it, or even on the stage at the show, you'll still definitely get that image of like, you know, people's legs will wobble. And I think, what would you say, Rob? It's usually 2 or 3 weeks of just doing it almost passively, not even having to put so much time into it, that the muscles actually get switched on, woken up, and then start working for you. And it's at that moment that it has a huge impact on your skiing.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think 3 weeks is generally, I think if you talk to any sort of personal trainer or anyone that's kind of involved in sort of exercise science, like 3 weeks is kind of like your base to see change. You know, so rather than just kind of doing something once and expecting to see a result, that's just not going to be the case. This goes back to that whole kind of process that we were talking about with physiotherapy a bit ago. You need to be doing things for a minimum of 3 weeks, really, until you actually start to see these benefit what you're doing, which in our sport is brilliant because we don't ski all year round, or not many of us ski all year round. So you've always got those kind of interim periods before you go back to the sport where you're actually ready to hit the ground running once you put your skis back on. So you can almost time this quite well, all of these exercises, for your next ski trip.
Well, do you know what's also, Rob, you made me think there to add on to this, and you guys might also, you know, be able to relate to this. You know, we're all about to go onto a sport where we expect our legs to be stable, but when you look at day-to-day life, and like what's required of your legs laterally. Just generally, look, just think of it day to day. And you've got a grippy sole on your running shoe, or your shoes that you're walking to or from the station or from work on, or whatever you might be doing. You're on your mountain bike, your pedals aren't wobbling sideways. They are stable, they're fixed. Your feet are either clipped in or they're on some quite grippy studs. Most stuff we do doesn't require lateral control, but yet, jumping into a sport that we're all about to get massively passionate back into when the winter does kick off, we're going to be leaning at lateral angles at about an average of 30 miles an hour, going around corners, sometimes tight corners, sometimes unexpected sudden turning corners, and just expect our lateral control muscles that have not really been exercised, not really been used, not really been tested most of the year, just to switch on and stabilize the legs. It kind of ain't going to happen. You'll be fine. It's not like, don't go skiing because you might just collapse in your legs. Of course not. But the reality of it is, the sport of skiing it's got a performance element to it. And, it will require at a certain stage that, you guys have an element of control. The better you are at this, the safer your knees will be, no matter what you do on skis. That's the reality of it. But the beauty of it is when you get really good at this and can control and can wake up these muscle groups, your technique will change because you've got so much less micro correction to do during the turn. You're actually in control. You're on your skis. Less things go wrong. So more focus is on about positive movements, actually enjoying the good side of skiing. Sorry, I talked on a lot about it, but it's just something that came to mind when you were saying that, Rob. It's like, this is something we don't do in day-to-day life. Why do we expect it to work when we go skiing? So yeah, great exercise to work on, and will make a big difference for when you do go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I just put it up to the slide there, guys, of more just like a real life kind of situation. It's like that's what we're looking for. But then if you think about the environment that you're in, deep powder is obviously the classic because it's such an unstable surface that to have this kind of like ability to kind of micromanage what you're doing sort of within the millimeter is a really, really difficult thing to do. You can't just like hit the ground running and be able to do that. You've got to you have to put that time in before to understand what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and how you're trying to do it. So that's why these exercises are really, really good to go through. Do you want to move on to point 3, Warren?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think point 3, it's our major one. It's the one I think when most of you, and let's just say a lot of you jump off this call and go and chat with your ski buddies, today, tomorrow, the weekend or whatever, and actually run through point number 3. So as we said before, it's testing the inner rotation of your outside leg. So on that inner rotation of your outside leg, we want to know that you've got a range of movement where you could naturally steer that leg around without being affected by a limited range of movement that then makes you have to hip rotate to get to the end of the turn. There's nothing wrong with moving your hips and rotating your hips when you're skiing. I mean, that will happen on certain types of turns, certain types of speeds. But when you're skiing down the fall line and you're making medium or short radius turns, you want to know that your legs can steer freely. You want to know this anyway for all elements of skiing. And Rob spoke about moguls and the importance of having good rotation in the legs. But once the hip rotates because of a blockage of movement, and let's just say in an ideal world, your scores were 70 degrees rotation to the left of your outside leg, steering from the left to the right. And when you went the other way from the right to the left, your right leg being measured going left was also 70 degrees. Now that would be, visual, would be brilliant for me and Rob to see that in a room. When we're in a room, however, what normally happens is, and I'm going to give you a rough average, people will get roughly 30 degrees one way and about 60 or 70 degrees the other way. That's the norm. So that's what we get. That's what we're going to get when we go up to Inverness on the 1st, when all the way down the country until we get, to the London, the National Snow Show. We're going to be scoring on a regular basis, usually 25, 30 degree differences between people's left rotation and right rotation. And we know that when they're on the limited side, and let's say it only gets to 30 degrees, 35 degrees, when you're turning, and let's just say it is your left-hand turn, you're steering your skis around and you've hit 35 degrees, you have no other choice than to hip rotate. Not because you wanted to, but because that's your physiological block. It's an unusual movement. We just spoke actually about the unusualness of having to use lateral control muscles in your day-to-day life. Well, get this. Whenever do you need to inwardly rotate to a degree of 70 degrees your leg inside your hip without the hip moving? There's practically nothing that we do. And yet, time and time again, we sort of don't ski all summer, and then we come back to it and we clip in our skis, and then we go to ski off, and we just expect our legs are going to turn left and right the same without any interference. They're not. It just doesn't happen. But we're talking about people that are regular skiers still having this, difference in left and right. So this one is such an important test to, first of all, become aware of, like to wake up on it. And even if your only way of doing something to sort of better the test was just rehearsing it, you'd make a huge change even between now and the ski show. So, Rob, you can explain it in terms of like how we see skiers, especially when you're on steep slopes. Like, this is the key test for us. This is the one that really counts. But love to find out if anyone out there knows of any other reasons or day-to-day things we do where we have inner rotation of the outside leg. But yeah, what's your take on it, Rob?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, this is our sort of kind of our bread and butter, really. This is the sort of stuff that we try to pay particular attention to, because it's one of those things that I think everybody knows about and everybody can feel, but it never really gets addressed properly. So a classic example would be like if you were going to do a hockey stop, for example, you'll always have your go-to side that you prefer doing it to, particularly, in an emergency situation. Let's say like your group of friends have all stopped abruptly and you've come in a little bit too hot. You'll always come in one side that you want to sort of you feel a bit more comfortable kind of using that braking turn to. The other example of it would be coming to the top of a steep section facing the wrong way. I think we all get that. I still get that now, where you come into it and you're like, oh, bloody hell, I wish I was facing the other way here so I could do my other turn first. And it's all these like classic kind of scenarios that we know it exists, and we try and sort of paper over the cracks a little bit to kind of get around it because we're all decent skiers, but then we don't really address the root cause of the problem. So it's only really since 20 years ago that we started kind of talking about this and addressing this problem with recreational skiers that we started seeing huge results and massive kind of those huge imbalances in left and right turn weaknesses started to kind of like level off quite a lot, just because we started to become aware of it. This isn't really sort of going into a lot of detail from a physiological point of view. This is just being aware of the problem in the first place and how to actually fix it. So once you actually start to add on the off-snow stuff, so some of the stretching, for example, some of the mobilizing exercises that you can do to kind of increase this range of movement, that's when you start to see the real big results. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute, just so I can actually find, because we've got some other videos that I'll try and find on our YouTube channel that I didn't actually bring up before, but I'll just if you carry on talking with us, I'll just find those other videos because there's some really good ones. I'll just drop into the chat just now.
So this would be great. So if everyone listened to this tonight, could watch that sort of explanation of this test. All you're going to do is you start the test off, and you're better off doing it with a colleague or a buddy, partner. Your hips are facing at 0 degrees, and so are your feet. So your feet are standing as you'd naturally stand. And then someone or yourself in front of a mirror, wherever you do it, you'd slowly step your feet around, being conscious of not just twisting your foot. You'd kind of want to be steering your leg from the upper part of your leg. Your lower leg would sort of follow. And as you're working around, like we do in skiing, you would use your lower leg slightly.
It's on screen now, guys. Sorry,
so you can see what the test is here. So you measure what your limit is. Now, when you look straight ahead, imagine the purely sideways is 90 degrees. 45 degrees you can roughly work out between 0 and 90. And you're roughly sort of looking at that range. Now, wherever that sort of outside leg, the inner rotation of the outside leg gets to, without stressing it, you can't force this. The ball and socket joint is quite precious. You don't ever want to force your movement. We're very conscious when we do these tests with people to try to talk them out of forcing the range. As soon as you get to that point where it feels like it starts to want to come around with the hip slightly, that is your limit. And on that test, as we said, there'll be a difference between your left and right. Very rarely in a room do we get 70 degrees each way. We do get it. It's usually someone that's very much into their yoga has got very open hips, feels very comfortable with it. But that's the reason that we want to try and encourage it, because, once you see the difference, you get out there. First of all, really simple, fix for it is putting a pole across your hips and then just stepping each way. Usually within a week, someone opens out by about 15, sometimes even 20 degrees without even doing major physiological work. But that's the thing for us is when someone comes out, and let's say they booked the best instructor in the world, and she was $1,000, £1,500. Doesn't matter what it was in terms of what you spent. That instructor still couldn't change that within a week. And that's the reality of a lot of people's ski time. It's a week holidays, a 1 week sort of chance you're going to get. This is why indoor snow domes and dry slopes are great places to go and practice and see how it's made a difference to what your tests are. But this alone, on its first understanding and awareness, is the one where you are looking at a piece of movement that you do not do in day-to-day life. So just don't expect it to function beyond your natural, what you've got already. Don't expect it to go beyond that without putting work into it.
Just incidentally, just on the floor there, guys, you can just probably see as you watch the sort of video through, you can get these rulers just off Amazon, and they've got like a little angle display just on the thing there. So if you zero it off, obviously you can see just where the cursor of the on the computer is there. If you use that as the 0 line and then measure it off there, it'll give you a pretty accurate sort of readout as to what the internal rotation of that outside leg would be. Okay. The other way of doing it, obviously, as Warren mentioned at the start, is having someone else just to help you. So when we do this test, we'll actually just stand in front of you, just with our hands on your hips, and just when we start to feel the hip girdle start to rotate, that's when we sort of mark it off, basically. So it's how the femur rotates within the hips to the point that it won't do it anymore, and then the hips naturally come round after that.
Yeah, I can't stress enough, guys. Never force it. Be natural. But if someone's holding your hips for you, if you've got a buddy you can work on this with, they'll hold each side of your hip. They'll stabilize your hip, and that way they'll try and where you'll see the clear score. And what we'll have at the ski show and on the tour dates that we go to around the UK, Rob can put a link to our tour dates. You might be in an area that you live within. And as I say, Ski Club of Great Britain reps have got a lot of this knowledge as well. You will be able to get a floor plan with a 0 to 90 degrees, and you'll clearly see then where you get to. What Rob's showing you now, actually, some really great exercises. You can try these at home to add to it. Rob,
yeah,
these are the static.
Yeah, so again, like when we're talking about fixing these problems or improving these ranges of movement, we kind of have to attack it in like a bit of a sort of three-way method. I think it's very, very important that we don't get too carried away with flexibility here. I think that's the big sort of elephant in the room when we finish these chats, is that you then go away thinking that, well, I just need to improve my flexibility, and that's that. That's not the case. I mean, I know Warren just mentioned then about like yoga, for example. Like we've had that before with people that have practiced yoga quite a lot. If they are super, super, super flexible, but they don't have good mobility or stability attached to that flexibility, it kind of negates it a little bit. What I mean by that is about mobility basically it means repeating the same movement well a lot, basically. So you can do it the same every single time. Stability basically means exactly the same as what, as what we're alluding to as well, doing it with strength. Okay, so actually being able to perform that movement under force. Okay, so it's important not just to get our sort of blinkers on and just think about becoming flexible here. It's not. We've got to become mobile with it, and we've got to become stable with it as well. So, for example, like this is actually, I'll just click on this one here. This is a really good mobility exercise that kind of goes with it as well. Sorry, just let the adverts play through. Let's get that. So there's a range of leg steering exercises there. So yeah, so we've just seen the first one, which is that. I'll put all the links on here because these have all got commentary over the top as well, guys, kind of explaining how to do it. You can just kind of see there the little heel lifts coming off the ground. All that works into this area here. So it's the hip socket, it's the ball of the femur rotating inside the hip here. Okay, that is really, really key. Moving on from there. Again, you look at the simplicity of this. This is something that you can do just kind of sitting on the sofa, guys. It's not really anything sort of too strenuous. but it's that idea of keeping the hips level and just opening up that sort of ball and socket joint. Same idea there, bringing a little bit of extra flexion to it from the upper body. And then from a mobility point of view, this is actually quite a good one. So I'm sure everybody's got a ski pole or even a broomstick at home. Okay, but just working through really, really steady, accurate, mobile exercises. Again, like it's not got the commentary over the top of it, but if you watch this video later, you'll understand a little bit more as to how to do it and why it's being done in such a sort of precise way. Okay, but these are brilliant exercises just to kind of work and open up that sort of rotary movement that we don't really use. I mean, it's like, as Warren will quite often say for a joke, you don't walk down the street like that. You know, it's like doing all these crazy exercises. You know, this is very specific for skiing. Okay, and you need it every single ski turn you make. Even when you're carving, you still have to have that ability to be able to separate the upper body and lower body.
Robert, there's a really interesting story. I'll just explain this. We've got one coming up at Hemel early October, I think it is. Or no, early October is actually up at Chill Factory, which is now the Snow Centre, the Northern Snow Centre. And then we've got another course that takes place at Hemel. I think it's on the 21st of October as well. And that's the ski club, ski with us days. And they're really good. They're 2-hour sessions. You get a lot from them as a ski club member. And on these sessions, what happened to me in the summer when I was running one of them at Hemel, I was talking to a ski journalist that came along, and ski journalist Terence said, "Oh, you've obviously got to be an advanced skier to really take advantage of this." And we're like, "Not at all." Happened to be in front of a beginner's lesson taking place. And what was really interesting, talking to this journalist, and I was trying to explain, no, it's for every intermediate skier, it's for every advanced skier, it's especially for skiers maybe returning from injury or lacking confidence. But we watched a beginner lesson take place. So people, they're at the stage of snowplow turning. And it was really interesting to see a group of 6 skiers on a beginner lesson, learning to snowplow turn, which we all know, if it's not us, it's our friends or people that we know that are trying to experience the sport for the first time. And on this beginner lesson, nearly everybody, you could see it clearly, favored in the snowplow turn, the early phases of snowplow turning. Everyone favored one side clearly. Everyone had their natural side in the snowplow turn that they kind of almost did without too much effort. The other way, it was all their shoulders, it was their hips, and then their leg didn't want to go the other way. I think this is almost like what Rob said earlier. That's the beginner lesson and how that shows to beginners and why this is important. If you've got buddies or friends that are learning to ski for the first time, yeah, try and pass on the knowledge to them. But then at the other end of the spectrum, it can be your first run in a steep run or an itinerary run, or, like Rob said, you traversed on into this steep run where you've got to put in that first turn that can feel like a dreaded first turn if the conditions ain't right or it's steeper than you're used to. And we know, because we see it, that's where it really shows itself. If that movement pattern isn't really functioning naturally, it kind of almost shuts down in a way. And that's why we want it to be known that this isn't just for advanced skiers. This is really for all levels, to try and say, right, the sport of skiing requires you to steer your legs left and right, obviously to steer your skis. And for us, this is probably the most important test, and it'll run us in tonight. I mean, I know we're getting close to 5 to 8, so we'll be getting close to our 1 hour window. But those of you out there, you should maybe have a look at it and have a look at where the tour dates are. And obviously, the ski show in London and the Northern show are part of that tour that we do. And I'm sure some of you guys watching out there will be near to some of the places we're going to. And I can't stress enough what you get from these talks. It doesn't turn you into a ski instructor necessarily, but quite the knowledge that gets given on that night, you can get a huge stage forward in so many people skiing just by knowing how to perform the test, knowing how to help people with those tests. And that's, for us, why it is so important. And we'd welcome your test scores from that today as well.
I've just put the link on there, guys, actually, to our whole tour. Basically, that's not actually not including any of the ski shows. That's just the ski shops and sort of venues that we're going to, just part of the actual tour. So yeah, I know it's Peter put the ski club event above as well, which is great.
So what would be really nice, we'll be open to questions off the back of those first three key points. You know, the other points that are in that test, you can, you know, tonight perhaps after we finish the talk, in a few minutes, you'll probably have a chance to look through the other three tests. You know, I think everyone tonight, you know, quite simply on test number 5 of angulation and leg lean, you know, I think all of you are going to probably try that test, see how we show it on the videos, and then give it a go. I can't imagine anyone at home being like, I was just absolutely even on both sides. You'll usually find that one side is definitely slightly different to the other. It could be tighter, it could be more awkward, it might just be less proprioceptive. You know, you're less sort of aware in one direction to the other. But yeah, it's very important. But yeah, test number 3, you know, that's if you want to make that massive step change in your skiing, that's going to be the one where, you know, even before you come and meet us at the shows, you can even get started on that already.
There you go. I've just put the whole playlist on for the Ski Technique Lab from my YouTube channel, guys. There's the reason why I didn't do that earlier, because there's a lot of other videos on there, so it's quite easy to get a bit sort of overwhelmed by it. But if you now you know what we've been talking about over the last hour with those specific tests, you'll be able to pick out the other relevant information from the existing videos on that playlist as well.
I didn't know if Charlotte or Pete, have you guys have you had a pop at these, or are you going to give them a go when the shows are on?
Oh yeah, definitely. I used to do ballet as a kid, and actually a lot of the movement and like just um, being aware of your body, and I guess yoga and Pilates and things like that, just like all helps with just being aware of your body. And I think a lot of this is just being aware what what movement you have. So it was really interesting just to see those tests and then give them a go after this talk.
Please tell me that you do ski ballet as well, Peter. Please,
Oh yeah, yeah.
just say
Bring
yes.
it back. Bring it back, please.
Yeah, ski ballet was great, right? I mean,
amazing.
yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, haven't combined the two yet. Maybe I should give it a go.
Next staff trip, we can give it a go. I did 20 years of ballet, and I'm hypermobile. We'll win. I did just test the foot shuffly one, and obviously I think I'm 3 months post-op now.
Okay.
Anyone who doesn't know, I have ruptured my ACL for the 4th time, and had my meniscus done for the 2nd time. So I'm not skiing this season, but because of the hypermobility, it was relatively even, but you can obviously, where that injury is on the left leg, it feels tighter.
Yeah.
But I was looking at your video going, how far is his feet going? And when you were saying, yeah, that 90 degrees, I was like, oh, yeah, bang on, lovely. And I think I had a party trick when I was a child, which was I used to turn my feet backwards.
Oh, wow.
It was just really gross. But obviously, what's very interesting is actually when I ski, I think you mentioned it really early on, that foot flexion in the boot, my ankle flexion is atrocious partly because I did ballet for 20 years. So pointing feels a lot more natural. But, you know, having pointy feet and backwards feet is clearly the way that I need to go. So I'll come and see you at the show, and we can have a proper.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be brilliant, you know, to gather people together, you know, especially, you know, members of the ski club, to just bring people in and educate people on it. Because the biggest thing that me and Rob want to get out of this is that people share the information, you know, that share it with your ski buddies, share it with the group of people you ski with, and make the most out of your holiday. But the two key ways of looking at this is the more knowledge you learn about this stuff, is one and probably the most important part. It reduces the risk of injury. You know, that stability in mobility that Rob was talking about greatly reduces the risk of injury. You're much better prepared for your actions are going to be smoother as you go into the sport, but your reactions are going to be much stronger to deal with adversity. But then the other part of it is, you know, everyone always complains about things like the intermediate plateau. I mean, these modern days is almost called the advanced skier plateau, where everyone's stuck on a certain level, gets a bit blocked going into powder, steeps, or moguls, and finds that that's where their performance really hinders. And having this background work of opening out ranges of movement but stabilizing him at the same time makes the learning curve better. You know, you get out of the ditch of a plateau quite often just by biomechanically becoming sound in the movement patterns required to do the sport of skiing technically correct. So, you know, injury prevention and performance enhancement is a huge part off the back of this as well.
Excellent. Well, I think unless anybody has any final questions, we're nearly at 7 o'clock, but that flew by because it was so interesting actually just to see all the different exercises and think the talks behind it. Um, we'll drop all the links into the YouTube video into the caption like before. It normally takes a couple of days to upload these, but they'll be on the website soon. And please do have a look at sort of the events that both Warren and the ski club host in partnership too. So have a good rest of your evening and catch you at the next one.